We are the Gabay family.
And we are watching from Belgium.
Hi, we're the Lebo Press family, and we're watching from Highland Park, New Jersey.
Hello, we're the Pearl family, and we're joining you from London.
Hi, we're the Stillman family,
and we're watching from Phoenix, Arizona.
Hi, I'm Kygo, and I'm 5 years old, and I have FD.
We're the Baker family, watching from Los Angeles, California.
Hello, we are the Blumenfeld family, and we are watching from Haifa, Israel.
Hi, we're the Clauses from Bethesda, Maryland.
Hey, we're the Cohens, joining from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Jeff.
I'm Franny. And I'm Marcia, and we're looking forward to joining in on our first virtual FD Day.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Tully, and I'm watching from Australia.
Veronica and Helena Segal from São Paulo, Brazil.
We are the Yeazer family, watching from Montreal, Canada.
Hi, I'm Alexia, and I live in Newport, Florida, and I can't wait to see you all Sunday.
Hi, we're the Stacks family, joining you from Brookville, Maryland.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to see all the FD faces and families all around the world. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to our 35th annual FD Day conference. My name is Faye Ginsburg, and I'm sitting in my apartment in Greenwich Village, 2 blocks away from Washington Square Park, where for the last week we've had peaceful demonstrations for racial justice going on. These are momentous times. This is my 7th year serving as the president of the Dysautonomia Foundation, which is now in its 69th year. In addition to being the mother of Samantha, who's been living well with FD for 31 years, thanks to the medical support of the Dysautonomia Center, I'm also a professor at NYU. I want to take a moment to recognize the challenging circumstances created by the current pandemic, and hope that you and yours are well. Given the fragility of people with FD, many of us were among the first to shelter in place, taking every possible precaution to protect our loved ones, and we're still doing that. So far, the FD community has remained relatively unscathed. While we would rather meet in person, by moving online, for the first time, we have been able to gather the FD community from across the globe, as we just saw. We're really delighted that we have people from Belgium, Brazil, Australia, and more, and our international chapters in Israel, Canada, and England, as well as our FD team in Israel, including Tel HaShomer Hospital, Hadassah Hospital, and Tel Aviv University. Our mission as a foundation is to promote awareness and help provide the best clinical care and research possible for those with FD through our support of the NYU Dysautonomia Center. It exists because of the collective efforts of the families and friends of this small but mighty group. And along with major research grants, we underwrite the essential work of our brilliant and dedicated doctors, nurses, and scientists who make the lives of people with FD longer, stronger, and more fulfilling. Over the course of today, they will be talking to you about their cutting-edge work, and in particular, our ongoing FD Natural History Project, a reminder of how essential it is to have everyone's participation in this important dimension of our current research. I also want to underscore that the foundation faces a time when raising funds is particularly difficult for everyone. We appreciate that many of you face challenges brought on by the pandemic. For those of you who have given to us in the past, we are so grateful. And if you can, I encourage every one of you to join our efforts at a time when we are especially in need. In the words of Hillel, if not now, when? We have a lot of great presentations today that I know you're eager to hear, so I will be brief but heartfelt in my thanks. My deep appreciation goes to the hard work of our board of directors for their leadership, guidance, fundraising, and uncompromising commitment to supporting the Dysautonomia Center, now in its 50th year. We're profoundly grateful to the work of Dr. Horatio Kaufman, Director of the Dysautonomia Center, Dr. Lucy Northcliffe Kaufman, Associate Director, and the entire team, Dr. Alberto Palma, Dr. Bhumika Balgobin, Leanne Lugg, Dr. Maria Katrina, and our terrific new nurse practitioners, Zenith Khan and Kaya Delamo, as well as Jose Martinez, who's celebrating 10 years as clinical research coordinator at the center. So a shout out to Jose. We thank them all for their expert care for those with FD, their help in putting this day together, and for their dedication to making sure that everyone in our community stays healthy and well informed, especially during this pandemic. Next, let me recognize and thank our Scientific Advisory Board, made up of physicians, scientists, researchers, pharmaceutical professionals, and others who share their expertise and help guide our research strategy. We thank Mike Brownstein, who stepped down after many years of excellent work, and we're fortunate to transition to our new superb leadership, the dedicated co-chairs, scientists Dr. Francis Lefcourt from the US and Dr. Adrian Gilbert from Israel, who bring renewed energy and dynamic perspectives in helping us map the road forward. And we're really especially delighted to be able to unite teams from both countries. We will hear from more of all these people over the course of the day. Last but not least, I want to thank the Foundation team for their excellent work on so many fronts. Our staff, Erin Breen and Natasha Weinstein, who, with interns Sean Zhang, Perry Goldberger, and Keshi Tarian-Kegel, keep the office humming, raising money, running events, building awareness, all under the leadership of our terrific Executive Director, Lainey Etkin. It's my pleasure now to turn things over to Lainey. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Good morning, everyone. I want to join Faye in welcoming our friends from near and far. I'm so happy to be here today. This is my third FD Day as Executive Director of the Foundation. I never imagined that I would be speaking to you from my living room, but I like to think that today is about silver linings. Although we cannot be together in person, the silver lining of a virtual FD Day is that we are able to bring together so many more people from all over the world. We could not be more thrilled that for today's program, we have more than 250 households calling in, more than 500 people attending today's program, 9 countries are represented, and 25 states are represented. If you have access to the chat feature on the YouTube station, now would be a great time to post a comment. Tell us where you're listening from and say hi to all your friends who you may not be able to see in person today. I'd also like to give you a brief update on what's new at the Foundation. First of all, in response to the global pandemic, we began offering virtual hangouts on Zoom for people with FD, for an opportunity for them to see their friends virtually and just spend some time together, for those who have been quarantining for so long. If you are not participating and you would like to, please do reach out to the Foundation next week and let us know, and we will get you set up for that. We also have a terrific group of young adults that have formed a group called Next Gen. These are siblings and cousins of people with FD and friends, and they are working with us to raise awareness for FD and to help raise money. If you're not involved and like to learn more, again, please contact the Foundation. We've also created a COVID-19 section on the website where we are consolidating information on the coronavirus, including important news and updates from the Dysautonomia Center and other articles that we think may be of interest to you. Please continue to check back regularly for updated information. Coming up, hopefully in October, we have scheduled a patient-focused drug development meeting with the FDA in Washington, D.C. We don't know if that will be live or virtual, but it will be a great opportunity for us to educate the FDA about FD and its unique qualities. They want to hear the voice of the patient, so this will be a great opportunity for people with FD and their families and caregivers to really talk about your personal experiences, your priorities, your needs, what bothers you most about FD, and what you're looking for. So you will hear more about that later today, and we will be continuing to communicate with you about that from the Foundation. So stay tuned for more details in the weeks and months to come. And of course, the Foundation is proud to continue to support medical care at the Dysautonomia Center, to promote scientific research and collaboration, and to provide a platform for education, communication, and community building through resources including our website, e-blasts, social media, and our newsletter Discourse. These are all good things, I would be remiss, however, if I didn't also acknowledge the difficulties the Foundation is facing as a result of the pandemic. The Foundation is truly facing financial challenges. Many of our fundraising events have been canceled. Donations are down. We are learning to do more with less. Your support is more critical than ever before to keep our work going. Please consider making a gift. You can see information about how to do so on the screen. You can also go to our website anytime. And we look forward to hearing from you after today about any ideas that you might have about how we can help keep the Foundation going financially. Remember, the Foundation is here for you, and we need your help to keep it going. And back to the silver lining. Today is about building community, bringing us all together, because together we are stronger, and together we can accomplish so much more. And finally, just a few housekeeping items for today. We encourage you to post along with us throughout the day on your preferred social media channel, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, using the hashtag FDDay 2020. Let them know we're out there. Continue to raise awareness for FD. We also invite you to check out related FD Day materials on the website, including a fantastic research booklet prepared by the Dysautonomia Center and a program and schedule for today in case you want to see what's coming next. There will be 2 separate question and answer sessions during the program today, one about clinical care and one about research. Many of you sent questions in advance, and our teams have been reviewing those questions. And you also will have the chance to submit live questions on the chat feature on the YouTube channel. And if you have any technical issues today, please send an email to info@famdisc. We have Erin standing by to help you with anything that you may need. And now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Boaz Kotik from the Israeli Familial Dysautonomia Organization.
Shalom, my name is Boaz Kotik. I'm a member of the Managing Committee of the Israeli FD Association. I live in Haifa, Israel, with my wife Hagit and our 3 children. Ya'ara, our eldest daughter, age 17, as FD. I would like to thank the New York FD organization for organizing this unique online event and for so warmly including the Israeli FD community. I would like to tell you something about the Israeli Familial Dysautonomia Organization. Altogether we have 100 FD patients, split roughly 50-50 between Haredi and non-Haredi families. Most are located in the center of the country in Greater Tel Aviv or Jerusalem areas, though we do have members in the very north and south of the country. We strive to be an inclusive community and arrange a variety of activities and support services for all our patients and families. Each is involved as they choose. One of our key activities is our patient support groups. As many of us live relatively close to each other, Israel is not that big. There are several different groups who meet once or twice a month. In these COVID-19 times, we have moved over to more frequent online meetings, or alternatively conference calls for the Haredim. These online meetings give good answer to the need of members to communicate, especially for the mature patients, which their groups are very active, while meeting each other physically became impossible. These meetings are guided. Lately, as meetings became online, some new participants also joined, as meeting became so simple. The Israeli Familial Dysautonomia Organization was established in 1983. Over the years, our organization represented FD patient rights and interests to government bodies and health insurance organizations. Many achievements were reached, including tax benefits, substantial reduction in cost of medical eye products, special nutrition products like full nutrition and other health products, mandatory through health office. Recently, we have been very successful in lobbying the National Insurance Institute on behalf of FD patients to automatically receive full disability benefits. We have a close relationship with the 2 hospitals treatment centers at the Tel HaShomer and Hadassah, and work closely with the leading Israeli scientific researchers in the field. Israeli FD families share information and support each other, mainly using the WhatsApp web. It's also a main communication channel for the managing committee with members of the society. We will be very happy to establish similar communication platform also with the US families and families in other countries as well. We are committed to supporting and participating in the natural history study being led by the New York Center in collaboration with the Israeli centers. And we do everything we can to encourage our patients to provide data for this important research. I would like again to thank the organizer for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you and for enabling your Israeli cousins to fully participate. We look forward for more such joint events for the benefits of all FD patients and families. Thank you.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Horatio Kaufman, Director of the Dysautonomia Center at NYU.
Good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in. I am Horatio Kaufman, the Director of the Dysautonomia Center at NYU, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 35th Annual FD Day. As many of you know, the first Sunday in June every year for 35 years now, the FD community meets at NYU to see each other, to talk about what's going on and what will happen. And this year is not different. Although we are meeting virtually rather than physically due to the pandemic, the spirit is exactly the same. And perhaps there is a silver lining to this pesky virus because it allows the whole FD community to meet together online. And what a big community that is. So we have a very busy program today. I'm going to switch to my screen to show you a few things. You know, today, these are difficult times, but today we need to celebrate. And we have many reasons to celebrate and be proud of. First, we celebrate the extraordinary role of the FD Foundation that makes the close bond between patients and families and the medical community possible. And they've been doing it for 50 years. You know, this is a very special foundation. Many board members are parents of affected children, but there's more to that story. Everyone with FD has a common ancestor. That's why it's called a founder mutation. Now, you know this story, but I want to tell it to the young. And like every story, it starts with once upon a time. 500 years ago, in the 16th century, a Jewish person in the north of Europe, where Poland is now, was born with a mutation in his genetic code. Now, the genetic code is like the Torah, full of instructions, detailed instructions to make the body grow and work. Each gene is a chapter of the Torah. And the FD mutation is a misspelling in just one letter, in one word, in one sentence, like a typo. For example, like typing exit with a C instead of exit with a C. Now, with that misspelling in the genetic code, the descendants of that founder, of that first person, some of his descendants will have, as you see here, exactly the same misspelling, while others would not. And then the descendants of his descendants, some of them would also, as shown here in black, some of them would also have the misspelling and will carry that signal of FD. And then will generations and generations continue. And from the original around 10,000 of Jews in the 16th century in that area, the population grew dramatically to over 3 million people at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, the Pale, where they were living, got very, very crowded. So the Jews decided to emigrate. And from there, from the north of Europe, over 2.5 million of them emigrated all over the world. As you see in this map, they went to North America, Central America, South America, England, Israel, South Africa, Australia, and a number of other countries. And where are they now? Well, now the population, the families follow very closely the migration routes of the initial migration. So 134 individuals with FD are now in the US for a total of 350 individuals with FD around the world, or individuals diagnosed with FD. You see 130 in Israel, 17 in England, 12 in Canada, 5 in Argentina, and so on. There is a growing number in Mexico. Now there are 3 patients in Mexico. You hear a little bit about that soon. Now, around 134 or 135 of people with FD are younger than age 24, and the remainders, around 185, are older than 24. And as you see, there's around a similar proportions of boys and girls at all ages. Now, what is our role? Our role is to provide the best medical care for FD patients and their doctors 24/7 all over the world, 7 days a week, including Shabbat. So how do we do it? Well, we do it because we have a fantastic treatment center in the US, and not 1, but 2 treatment centers in Israel. One in Tel HaShomer with Ori Efrati and Bat Elbar, and one in Hadassah with Alex Gilel. Now, within our center at NYU, we have, or in our center at NYU, we have a fantastic committed staff. We have Alberto Palma, who's a great neurologist, Lucy Norcliffe-Kaufman, who is basically in charge of almost everything, Patricio Millar and Bhumika Balgovin, autonomic disorder fellows that you met them, and they take a lot of care of people with FD. Zinir Khan and Daya Dalamo, our nurse practitioners, you are going to hear from them today. The Martinez, Maria Cotrina, the data managers, the administrative staff, Barb Morgenstern, a biomedical engineer from Israel, all doing fantastic work. Now, within the hospital, we also have a strong network of doctors of all specialties that can take care of each of your problems, from ophthalmologists like Lila Raju, that's a corneal specialist, to Dr. Kaufman and Friedman in the ICU, Dr. Kasachkov, a fantastic pulmonologist that has taught us a lot on how to treat these problems. Dr. Levy, who's an actual, a fantastic gastroenterologist, and Dr. Malter, the renal team, together with the transplant team that have now performed 4 kidney transplants in patients with FD. The last one is doing great. I want to highlight Dr. Matou, Dr. Matalon, and Dr. Lons that were responsible for that. Of course, all this information from the subspecialties is coordinated by the FD team, which of course is the one that controls the autonomic nervous system that controls the whole body. Now, we also have mental health support that I want you to know about. This is through Lily Armstrong, a psychotherapist that does teletherapy, and this is supported by the FD chapter in Montreal. And in addition to this, we also communicate with medical teams around the US and the world who see people with FD. They are doing the same, and in close contact with our center, the Israelis, and all of them, you will hear from them today. I cannot list them all, but I want to highlight a few of them. There are pediatricians in New York, like Stuart Ditchik, that see many of our Hasidic patients. Helma Patel in Montreal, also a fantastic doctor. Gabriela Howard in Vancouver, who spent time with us a few years ago. Sue Laurent in London, and Valeria Riodici and Ellen Merete, two excellent neurologists at Queen Square that are doing a very dedicated job taking care of patients with FD in London. Dr. Nasson in Brussels, that also a fantastic doctor. A doctor in Kassel who had seen in Germany some of our new patients. We're also growing the field in Argentina and in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, where we were lucky to go. Carlos Mendoza in Florida, a fantastic ophthalmology now at Bascom Palmer that sees our patients. And I want to highlight one person, Alejandra González Duarte in Mexico, that you see here. You see, 11 years ago, we were lucky that she spent a year learning and taking care of FD patients at our center at NYU. And you see, here is a certificate. So she's now in Mexico City taking care of patients with FD at the Instituto Nacional de Nutrición. And this is really a blessing because many of you are aware that there is a growing population of patients in Mexico. Not only Alejandra is taking care of them, she also was able to secure a very special equipment that now is only available in Mexico to study patients with FD. So Alejandra, keep the good work and thank you very much. I also want to emphasize Dr. Joel Gutierrez from Cuba. Joel Gutierrez is an extraordinary neurophysiologist. He comes every year and has been doing that for many years to New York to work with patients with FD. And together with us and other doctors from Australia, Dr. Macefield, based on work we did in FD, where we all received the first prize of the National Academy of Science in Cuba. So think for a second about that. Working on FD, a Jewish genetic disease, doctors from Cuba, Australia, and New York, and winning a prize in Cuba. Of course, Fidel had to agree. So keep the good work, Joel, and thank you very much. I also want to tell you very briefly the story of Lyndon Smith. Lyndon worked with Vaughan in Australia. He got very interested in the problem with coordination that people with FD had. So he decided to interrupt his medical studies in Western Sydney in 2016 and do a PhD. Where did he do it? He did it at our center at NYU, studying patients with FD. And he's now, the paper is just coming out, and he had fantastic results. What he showed is that although people with FD have a lot of trouble with balance in their legs, the arms, fortunately, compensate very, very well. So that article is being published now. These are the proofs, and it's very good news, fantastic work. Vaughan, thank you very much. And Lyndon, keep the good work, and all the community is grateful to you. Now, what I just showed you is one part of the story, because in addition to all the clinicians and nurses and medical care, there's a large team of basic research scientists around the world that are hard at work to find a cure for FD patients. You know, you're aware of Sue and Elisabetta at Massachusetts General Hospital. You know, Sue discovered the gene, that typo, that typing mistake that I was telling you. She spent years and years and found it. We are where we are now because of Sue. She has a big team and is still working, and of course you will hear from her today. We also have Francis Lefcourt, and with her team in Montana, Valerie Copy and Seth Walk. Frances is now one of the heads of our scientific advisory board. She does extraordinary work, has done mice models with FD, and she will show you some fascinating results in the retina that open the path to the possibility of genetic therapy. You'll hear a lot about that today. Also, Dragacic and Paula Dietrich, his wife, in Tennessee, also had produced a fantastic mice model in FD that is very, very useful for research. I also want to mention a new young researcher, Nadia Zeltner, who has started a new state-of-the-art lab in the University of Georgia. She's working on stem cells produced from people with FD, from cell cultures. This work promises to be very, very rewarding. Nadia, keep the good work. You have all our support, and thank you for doing it. I also want to mention Adrian Kreiner, who is here in New York, in Long Island. Adrian is one of the top world scientists in genetic disorders. He has discovered something called an ASO, a small molecule that is leading the way in curing another genetic disease, and we hope that Adrian will help us do the same with FD. I also want to mention Claudio Punzo in Massachusetts, working in genetics, Franco Pagani in Italy, and Miguel Weil, of course, in fantastic scientist in Tel Aviv. From you will hear a lot of details today. Now, what do we do with all this information? Well, we do a number of things. First, we try to put it all together and produce continuous guidelines to update physicians around the world who take care of patients with FD. And also, we published all the new findings. One that is not here, that we just got the communication today, is that our big study on carbidopa, a drug that we believe is very, very useful for the management of the blood pressure and the crisis in patients with FD, that big trial has just been accepted and it's also going to be published. So all this is to keep all the community up to date of what's going on. Now, I hope I gave you a little bit of a perspective of how this work is occurring. And I want to emphasize that each one has a role. It's like a symphonic orchestra. You see, in order to play the music well, everybody has a role. From the conductor that appears to move his arms all the time, to the panderet or the maracas that only move occasionally, regardless, they are all crucial to the music. And of course, you are in the orchestra too. And the orchestra, my friends, is playing for you.
You're hiding out so painfully. See yourself come out to play. A lover's rain will wash away your envy and your fear. So have no envy, no fear. When your sister turns to leave, only when she's most in need, take away the cause of pain by showing her we're all the same. Have no envy, no fear. Have no envy, no fear.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I hope I got you in the spirit and got you prepared for a fantastic day today. So what I want to do now is to give you a very brief message of our nurse practitioners.
Hello everyone, my name is Zenith Khan. I am a family nurse practitioner here at the NYU Dysautonomia Center. I started working here in August of 2019, and since then I've been constantly blown away by the compassion, the perseverance, and the resilience that FD patients and their families show. I have learned so much from you all, and what I truly love about the FD Center is its dedication to providing and supporting FD families to live their fullest possible lives. I'm grateful at times like this we're able to still come together, and I look forward to meeting you all. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Hi, my name is Kaya Dalamo. I'm a doctor of nursing practice and one of the nurse practitioners at the Dysautonomia Center. I joined the practice in October of last year, and since then have met many wonderful people and their families living with FD. Right from the beginning, I noticed that there was this deep sense of community and connectedness, almost like I'm working in a big family. And it's been a joy taking care of the members of this community, and a true honor to be welcomed so warmly by you. For those that I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, I hope to meet you soon. And I wish everyone well and to stay safe during these times. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. And now I have some breaking news. I want to, before we continue, I want to make certain that I update you on COVID. This is another thing we are very grateful for, is that our FD patients are doing much better, or have done much better than we feared. Only 4 patients were tested positive for COVID-19, and they're all fully recovered. Only one of them was admitted to the hospital. This is all around the world, and he did great. The others that were not admitted to the hospital also did very good, and you will hear from one of them today. We provide constant update information in the www.dysautonomiacenter.com. As you see, there are articles on the eye and the lungs, how to stay healthy during the COVID epidemic. So keep taking all the precautions not to be exposed to the virus, and everything will be fine. So what is next? Let me start the whole session today by giving you the clear objectives like we have them. The number one is that we know, thanks to Sue, what the genetic problem in familial dysautonomia is. Second, we know of at least 3 ways that we can fix that, and we believe they could work. So you will hear about that today, but we need your support and determination. I assure you, we can do this. We will do it in our lifetime. We will get to the promised land. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and have a fantastic day today. We are going to be listening to all your questions. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, families watching at home. My name is Lucy Norcliffe-Kaufman, and I'm the Associate Director of the Dysautonomia Center. Thank you, Horatio, for such an extraordinary presentation. You always set the tone for FD Day. It's always been a dream of mine to make FD Day an international event, and today we're starting with that now, which is really exciting. It's my pleasure to introduce one of our esteemed collaborators, a pediatrician in Israel, who is resourceful, smart, passionate about her patients, and takes care of many of our patients in FD with FD in Israel. Please welcome a message from Dr. Bat Elbar.
Hello, my name is Dr. Batel Baraluma. I'm a pediatric pulmonologist from the Sheba Medical Center. Maybe part of you remember me from around 7 years ago when I did part of my training in the NYU Dysautonomia Center. There I worked with Professor Felicia Axelrod, with Professor Horatio Kaufman, with Lucy. And after a period of very enlightening and interesting experience, I came back to Israel, and together with Professor Efrati, who's the head of the pediatric pulmonary unit, we established together a new FD center in Israel, in Sheba. Today we follow around 60 patients, and we came up with a very, very diverse and distinguished team of doctors that include me, the pulmonologist. We have a gastroenterologist, a neurologist, an expert in blood pressure, and a cardiologist. Also, we have our physiotherapist, chest physiotherapy mainly, a nutritionist, psychologist. We have an FD coordinator. We have our social worker. And together we try to give the best medical care that we can. We do that by inviting our patients every 4 to 6 months to do pulmonary function tests, to see our physiotherapist, to see the nutritionist, and we try to give a platform for good and healthy way of life and maintain a good quality of life. And and of course we encourage our patients to see the psychologist to maintain also a good mental health. I would like to add also that we work with full collaboration with the NYU Center in New York and also with Hadassah. We share information, we share data, we also do some research together. And after presenting our center, I would like to wish you all a very good FD day and hopefully see you soon. ביי. מעניינים. איך הולך באמת? הכל טוב מאמה? חזרת כבר לבית ספר? שלום חמוד. אני אבדוד לך לחץ דם, אתה מסכים? אוקיי, אז אני אשים לך שרוול כזה על היד. השרוול הזה בכל התקופות שלה. ואז תראה פה על קצת את הלחץ דם שלך. והמשקל אבל אותו דבר? כן? זהו? רגע, רוצה שאני אדליק לי.
Hello, my name is Nir. I'm one of the physiotherapists here at our center. Our treatment of the FD patients is composed of the physical part, and exercise is important for all of us, and the respiratory part. The respiratory part is keeping the lungs clean, avoiding exacerbations, and keeping volumes with inspiratory trainers and PAP masks, mechanical cough assists, and BPAPs. I wish you all a very good FD day and good health.
Hi, my name is Mary Fascha and I am the social worker of the Dysautonomia Center in Israel. And I'm very glad to be here in this FD day. It's important that we have now the opportunity to join all the FD centers in the world, and I'm happy for families and FD patients. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Bar. I'm a clinical pharmacist and I work in the pulmonary pediatric unit. And as part of my job, I work with the FD patients. And as you know, many of you get a lot of medicines on a regular basis. And my job is to see that there is no drug interactions, that no side effects, and basically that each one of you get the best treatment for him.
Good morning, everybody in New York. I really want to congratulate you in this special day, especially the FD patients and their families. All the best from Israel and from the Edmond and Lily Children's Hospital Sheba, the greatest hospital in the Middle East. Bye bye, everybody.
Hello. תגיד hello, תעשה ככה. Hello.
Hello.
נעשה ביחד?
Hello.
Thank you, Dr. Batelba, for such a beautiful message from your team there. It's, of course, it takes a village to take care of FD patients, and we're so proud to be able to work with some of the smartest clinical scientists that there are leading this effort. Continuing a long line of legacy of outstanding medical care of patient familial dysautonomia at Hadassah University, please welcome our next speaker, Dr. Alex Gilel-Hillel.
My vision for the FD Center requires a multidisciplinary approach to allow the best possible care for patients with complex diseases such as familial dysautonomia. Our center has a dedicated nurse, a social worker, that provide constant support for families outside regular clinic visits. Our dietitian, who specializes in feeding disorders, brings her expertise working closely with a dedicated pediatric gastroenterologist to address complex GI issues. Additionally, our physiotherapist works both in clinic and during hospitalizations with our patients to ensure pulmonary and neurological physical therapy. Our core team works closely with a nephrologist, a hypertension specialist, a neurologist, a spine surgeon, and an ophthalmologist, all of whom are dedicated to treating patients with FD and dealing with their unique problems. Each clinic visit includes regular follow-ups, in addition to extensive blood work, sputum culture, pulmonary function testing, and the patients are seen by the many specialists based on the unique set of problems they present. We are also incredibly involved in the research in the field of familial dysautonomia. You may hear today about the natural course study we participate in, led by the NYU Center. We also conduct clinical studies on the nature of sleep problems in patients with FD, the optimal approach to reflux treatment in infants with FD, and many more. I wish to congratulate the organizers of this wonderful day, and I hope we will be able to hear and learn new things today to continue progressing the care of FD patients together.
Hadassah has more than 30 years of experience in treating familial dysautonomia patients. The center at Mount Scopus is one of the leading centers in the world, collaborating with other centers both nationally and internationally on numerous clinical and academic topics. The multidisciplinary approach at our FD Center enables excellent treatment for our patients, both during routine follow-up and when in need of hospitalization.
Thank you for that great message from our collaborators in Hadassah. It's my pleasure to introduce the final speaker in our clinical session this morning, which is a man who I have the pleasure of working with every day. Not only is he a dedicated physician, but he's behind every single one of our successes when it comes to clinical research. He's smart, he's always inspiring, he's truly amazing. Please welcome Dr. Alberto.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alberto Palma. I'm one of the physicians and neurologists at the FD Center at NYU, and I'm delighted to be here. It's a pity we're going to do FD Day in person as we've done in the past, but at least this is better than nothing. And I'm sure many people are watching us from home, and I think it's a great chance to get together and discuss and talk a little bit about the situation and about the updates on FD as every year, right? So I want to introduce my talk. My talk is going to be a little bit a mix between clinical and research, right? And I know Dr. Kaufman has summarized all the clinical updates on FD, and then we'll have another session later on the research updates. So my talk is going to be very short and is intended to be like a transition between both talks, right? So, and let me share my screen because I'm gonna have the slides here. There you go. So it's about clinical care and clinical research in FD. Now, the thing is that many times when patients come to the FD center and we ask them to do procedures, many times they ask us, well, is this clinical or is this research? And you know, that's a very reasonable question, particularly in common diseases, right? For instance, many people have diabetes, and for diabetes, the clinical care of a patient, what is actual clinical care, is very well defined, and what is research is also defined and different at the same time. So there is like a Chinese wall between clinical care and research, right? But this is mostly for common diseases, right? Now, in rare diseases like in FD, this is not the case, you know, and clinical and research are usually entangled. So it is not possible to separate many times. And whatever we do for clinical care has implications for research. And also, when patients participate in research, it has direct implications in their clinical care. And I have two examples, right, to show you how this is the case, right? And again, this is a repetition. Research procedures can inform decision-making in clinical care. Information collected for clinical purposes is used to design research procedures, and both in rare diseases, both research and clinical care, it's impossible to disentangle. So please don't ask us anytime, is this clinical or is this research? It's the same, it's the same. For instance, let me explain to you a little bit. You know, at the FD Center in New York, but also in Israel, every single piece of clinical information that we get from patients, and it can be in office visits or phone visits or questionnaires or telemedicine visits or medical records from other doctors, all that information is collected and entered in our database, right? And you can see here how our database looks like. It has information on everything, and I want to bore you with the details, but we enter everything, right? Everything we get from you is entered in the database. And you know, I won't talk about the natural history of FD. That's something that Lucy will talk about, but that's the backbone of the natural history study, right? That's how we collect information from every single patient, and we follow patients over time. Now, definitely, and we collect information from every patient, and this is an example, right, of how our database looks like. And here you can see how simple it is for us to track the evolution of, for instance, the blood cells, right? This is the CBC of this patient. This is a fictional patient. It doesn't exist. And you see here how we can track their values over time. And this is an example, again, for the blood cells, for the CBC, for the complete blood count, but we can do that for every single value, right? So, and again, this is clinical information entered in our database, but of course, it's used to answer both clinical and research questions, right? So many of you ask us, oh, how many patients with FD have epileptic seizures? Or how many patients with FD can walk at age 30? Or how many patients with FD have received growth hormone? Or how many patients with FD have had cancer? Well, those are research questions in a way, right? And again, they may not be, it's difficult to disentangle. My point here is that all the information we collect over the years from every single patient, and we have around 700 patients now, every single patient ever diagnosed with FD that we have knowledge of is entered in the database, right? And we can use that information to answer all these questions. And these questions have clinical implications, but we can get research papers from those and research findings from those questions, right? And this is a real example that we did, right? So we asked one of these questions, okay, how many patients with FD have breathing problems during sleep? So what we did is we ask the database, we look at the database, we look at the information from all of our patients that had undergone sleep studies. And the answer was pretty surprising, right? So up to 91% of pediatric patients and 85% of adult patients have some degree of respiratory problems during sleep. And again, is this research? Sure, it's research. We got a research manuscript, it's published in a research paper, so this is clinical research, but this has immediate clinical applications for patients with FD, and that's why now we are so insistent that every single patient needs to have a sleep study, and they may most likely need to use the CPAP or the BiPAP. I won't talk too much about that today, but that's something we've discussed other years and that we definitely discuss when you guys come to our annual visits in New York or in Israel. There is another type of interaction. Before I talk about how we use clinical information that we collect during office visits, and we use that for research purposes. Here, the second example I have here is a little bit different, right? Is how by collecting research information, we can make clinical decisions, right? And one way to do this is with surveys, with questionnaires, right? I know many of you, or you know how we ask you to fill out a questionnaire every time you come to the FD Center here or in Israel to have an updated information on your clinical medications or allergies or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here are dedicated specific surveys that we may send you occasionally from time to time, right? And we did that recently, a year ago or a year and a half ago, to ask everyone about gastrointestinal problems. Some of you may remember that survey, right? So in fact, we sent it to 202 patients and families. So all of the patients that we had in our database that are still active and families active, we sent the survey. So you received it, but only 38% answer, right? Only 77. I'm not gonna admonish you for that, but that's another topic. My point here is that, you know, gastrointestinal problems, sure, we know that many patients have gastrointestinal problems. Many patients have crises, many patients have retching, vomiting, but not all the gastrointestinal problems are limited to crisis, right? And that was the goal of this survey. The goal of this survey was to determine what other GI problems FD patients have. And we were really surprised with the results, let me tell you, because, you know, 97% of FD patients have bothersome GI symptoms. And again, this is different from FD crisis. This is different from retching and vomiting. I'm talking about bloating, reflux, indigestion, swallowing problems. And for 42% of patients, these were the most bothersome symptoms. Worse than the balance, worse than the vision problems, worse than dizziness, worse than fainting, worse than swallowing problems. You know, almost half of the responders of this survey told us that the GI symptoms, other than the crisis, were their most bothersome problems, right? And, you know, of course, in clinical practice, we see that, we hear that when you guys come to the office visits, but it is much more powerful to have a huge sample of 77 patients that answer a specific survey. So my point here is surveys or research instruments can be very useful. And why is this useful when we get this information? Well, because now we pay much more attention to gastrointestinal symptoms, apart from the crisis, when you guys come into the clinic. And we are now involving more GI doctors, right? And we are trying to understand why is this happening in FD, why patients with FD have indigestion, why people with FD have bloating, why patients with FD have reflux. Well, it's not well understood. Sure, I mean, we know it's because it has to be something to do with the autonomic nervous system or with dysautonomia, but we need to understand that better eventually to develop treatments, right? And you know, the ultimate goal would be to develop guidelines for the treatment of gastrointestinal complaints in patients with FD, the same way we did with respiratory problems. You know, we did exactly the same with the lungs and sleep, and we put together a huge team of experts, including not just the doctors at the center and the research team at the FD Center, but also our colleagues from Israel and also a bunch of respiratory physicians. We sat down together. We reviewed all the clinical research that was available on the respiratory problems in FD, and we came up with specific recommendations, right? And this is a great example of how research in FD has immediate clinical consequences, positive clinical consequences, because now every patient with FD in the world can print these guidelines, show them to their local doctors, and their local doctors will be completely updated on what to do with respiratory problems in patients with FD, right? Regardless of whether they are in Germany or in the UK or in Australia, right? So they don't have to be at NYU or in Israel to receive the most cutting edge respiratory treatments, because they know what to do if they read these guidelines, right? So, you know, that's all I have to tell you. It's just for you to think or realize that every time we collect clinical information on you, it's going to be used for research purpose. And every time we do research, or we ask you to do research with surveys or with other projects, it's going to be eventually applied to you or to other patients with FD sooner or later, right? Clinical information is used for research purposes, and research results inform clinical decisions. So please, number one, don't ask us ever again if this is research or is clinical. It's usually both, right? It's usually both. Number two, when you get a survey, please answer the survey. It is very useful for us. It is very useful for us, and it will be useful for you, okay? And that's all I can tell you for now. I'll be happy to answer questions later in the Q&A section. And I'm sure the research part of the meeting is going to be very, very interesting. Okay, so I'm looking forward to answering questions with you guys.
Thank you very much, Dr. Palmer. I hope you found those talks informative and lots of great advice. Please know that we're here as your clinical research team and your doctors to guide you with whatever you may need, and our services are available 24/7. I would like to move now to an exciting part of the program in which we welcome our specialist physicians in familial dysautonomia to answer your questions and provide you feedback on some of the pressing issues that you've asked us that are your concerns. When you filled in the survey for FD Day, you filled in a number of questions that you wanted to pose for us. So we'll kick off with some of those. I would like to introduce our speakers that you've all seen. You see Dr. Alex Hillel, we have Batel Bar who joined us, we have Dr. Alberto Palmer and Dr. Horatio Kaufman. So let's start, hopefully, if you're all ready, with the first question that came in from our families. So we've obviously things are quite dramatic in New York City right now, and a number of questions that have come in are related to the COVID epidemic. And many families have asked us, are there specific precautions people with FD need to take to be able to stay safe at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic? Dr. Kaufman, I'm going to pose this question first of all to you.
Well, first, I want to tell you that you have to follow exactly the same precautions that your area is taking, and so far everybody's doing good. So keep focused, try not to keep social distance, and everything will be fine.
So now, Dr. Kaufman.
Yes. I think maybe, Alberto, do you want to comment about this?
Well, it's sure. I mean, it's essentially what Dr. Kaufman mentioned, right? Make sure you follow your local governmental recommendations, social distancing, And many patients and many families are asking us whether FD patients are at increased risk for COVID. And as far as we know, they are not. I mean, there is nothing in FD that may pose higher risks. At the same time, any precautions should be followed, right? So cleaning hands, social distancing, masks where that's advised, and keep calm. And if you have any questions, feel free to call us, email us, or call the team in Israel, right? And we'll be happy to provide to you with specific recommendations.
Thank you to both of you for those answers. I know we have a weekly meeting with our nurse practitioners, and we have a task force where we discuss, are we ready to come out with new guidance for patients with FD? And whenever there is something that we feel is we're ready to put out there for the entire population, we will give it, we will have an article on our blog, and we will use the resources of the foundation to help distribute that information to patients so it gets into your hands. So remember, sign up for our blog and sign up to the foundation so you stay in touch with those regular updates. Okay, next question, please. So this again relates to the situation that is changed our life quite dramatically, at least in New York City. And that should patients with FD be attending clinic visits or use at-home video calls to connect with their doctors? Dr. Palmer, I'm going to throw this question over to you.
Right, thanks, Lucy. So absolutely. I mean, right now the situation is making us changing rapidly to telehealth visits, and that's something we are already doing right now, right? So because due to the circumstances in New York City right now, NYU is not allowing to see new patients. So that's what we are doing right now, meaning we are doing telemedicine visits, and that doesn't mean we are not able anymore. That doesn't mean you can call us. I mean,
Lucy, can I comment on it?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Dr. Kaufman.
Yeah, go ahead, Horatio.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know if I was online. So look, Alberto is absolutely right. I just wanted to emphasize that it's both that are useful, and there are a number of things that can be done in this way, and others that require coming to the office. But we provide both and try to do the best with both options. So both of them are available, and I presume that Bat and Alex are doing the same, right? Offering a combination of both things to provide the best possible care.
So Bat, Alex, how is the situation in Israel? Is it quite different, or do you want to tell us how you're coping with or maybe you're less impacted? But Bat?
I think that now we're in a more, now we're seeing patients in the hospital. So because in Israel, the epidemics was less than in the US. So now everything is back to, almost everything is back to normal. And we started like 2 weeks ago to see patients here in the hospital, and we're doing good.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. And I know when I talk with both of our nurse practitioners, they say if you have any questions, please reach out to us, please talk with us, and they'll be happy to discuss things on like a case-by-case basis because everyone's situation is quite different. So can we have our next question that came in? Which is, are there any new patients with FD? We're not aware of any new patients with FD, but I wonder, Alex, do you want to comment about the new patients that you might be encountering in your clinic?
Right. So you know that, but I'm not sure how widespread this knowledge is, but we do have 1 or 2 new patients almost every year now for the last couple of years. And for a combination of reasons, some people are unaware of the Jewish heritage, some are unaware of the genetic screening tests, but basically what we experience is at least, as I said, 1 or 2 new patients, and this allows us to, re-examine
all the thesis of familial dysautonomia treatment, for example, looking at the guidelines respiratory care, we're trying to see how these new guidelines fit the old thesis of fundoplications, for example. So it's actually an interesting era to live through in FD.
Very, extremely. So if you have any questions, you can post them live to us on our chat feed, and they will come in, and you can reach our experts and get answers. So can we have our next question, please? How pervasive is anxiety in the FD population? And Bat, I'm going to pose this first of all to you. What's your experience?
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
How pervasive is anxiety in the FD population?
I think that because of the situation that was quite calm here in Israel, so everyone stayed tuned to what the public minister health instruction were, and we had no patients, no FD patients in Israel. So I think that the level of anxiety is not that high in Israel. I see that now that we open the clinics, patients don't hesitate and they come and they do everything they need, pulmonary function test, blood work. So I think that here in Israel, the level of anxiety is not that high, hopefully also in the States.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. I thought
so we have
I thought the question was more general, that anxiety is very common in people with FD. I just want to emphasize to all of you that anxiety, like Alberto was referring to about gastrointestinal problems, anxiety is as pervasive. So you are not alone.
So Dr. Kaufman, do you want to comment a little bit about how anxiety might manifest in someone with FD? Because quite often the signs and symptoms of anxiety are quite dramatic, right?
Absolutely, Lucy. And many of you are aware that what we call crises, these autonomic manifestations of feeling difficulty breathing and hypertension, tachycardia, vomiting, many times those are triggered by anxiety. So anxiety is very prevalent, and what we are all working, and I'm sure Alex and Bat are doing as us, in methods, in therapies that could work in reducing anxiety. And perhaps the even telemedicine and psychotherapy, surprisingly, is powerful. So it's important to know that anxiety should be addressed and should be treated. And anxiety itself can be the cause of many of the symptoms, like even the gastrointestinal, the blood pressure, and other symptoms can be in FD produced by anxiety. Like in the people that don't have FD, but in those with FD, the same is even more pronounced.
So I know that we are incredibly lucky that with the support of the Montreal chapter of the Dysautonomia Foundation, we're able to have a psychotherapist, Lily Armstrong, that works with us and can take a caseload of FD patients and help them through some of the challenges that they may be having. Dr. Palmer, do you want to comment a little bit on some of the treatment approaches we have for anxiety?
Sure, Lucy. So first of all, we need to address what are the potential causes of the anxiety, right? Sometimes these causes can be identified and can be reversible, right? And that's something that can be very individualized. That's the very first step. At the same time, we always have non-pharmacologic treatments for anxiety, right? And these can be targeting a number of different types of treatments, right? You have mindfulness. Many people improve with yoga therapy or with relaxation techniques or with breathing techniques. All these non-pharmacologic or behavioral techniques, these are really, really helpful for most patients. And they are, they are many times they are undervalued and underused because people are not aware of their existence and people are not aware that they can really be really helpful. And eventually, some people require some medications, absolutely. At the same time, medications can have a number of side effects, and that requires also a personalized treatment to make sure we minimize the side effects. And some medications commonly used to treat anxiety disorders can have dependency and addiction problems, right? So, just to send a message that there are many more treatments other than medications for these, for mood disorders and for anxiety problems, and we could help you with that.
So a hot topic, definitely something that we needs further exploration. It's complicated to treat, but we're there for it. So please, any questions that you may be having, submit them in our chat feature. We'd love to get to them. And if we can take our next question. So can patients use Precedex for crisis? And Dr. Palmer, I'm going to turn this one over to you because I know you've done some phenomenal work in helping us understand the effects of Precedex and how it might be used for a crisis.
Right, absolutely, Lucy. So the short answer is yes. I mean, we have been using Precedex for a number of years now. Precedex is essentially very similar to clonidine, but it has a number of advantages, right? The number one is that it can be used intravenous, which is something that we cannot do with clonidine. The second advantage is that its mechanism of action is very rapid. It kicks in really, really fast, and it weans off also really fast, which is also an advantage because we can target the dose and we can adjust the dose of Precedex very easily. There is one disadvantage, though, that because it is intravenous, only people in the hospital setting can use it, right? So it's something that we are using now more and more for patients coming into the ER and patients coming into the hospital for crisis. That's our medication of choice right now, right? So, and more we are teaching other hospitals other than NYU how to use Precedex for patients with FD when they go to their local hospitals or local medical centers, right? And that's something that works really, really well.
You know, in a few
instances,
instances,
Dr. Kaufman, many of the families at home may not be aware of how Precedex came about as a treatment, and you were there. I wonder if you'd like to share the story.
well, you caught me off guard as usual. Yes, it was a father. There was a father. He was a father of a patient that is an anesthesiologist, and we were trying to get the crisis of his son under control. And he's the one that said, "Look, I'm using Precedex all the time. Try it." And I thought it made a lot of sense. And the rest is history. And we've been using it since that time. One thing I want to comment, a possibility is that, and we've used it in a number of cases, and it's published, that it can be used intranasal. That's the way it's used in India, in rural areas. So we copied that model and tried it in a number of patients, and it worked, intranasal. So for an emergency or in a situation when the emergency room is not equipped with IV equipment, and in some smaller towns they may not be, it can be used intranasal. So that is published and will also be available in the blog. Lucy, I'm sure you can make sure of that if somebody is interested using it acutely in the ER or even at home, as has happened in New York.
But is there anything that you want to add in that is different about the way you treat the crisis of your patients that you encounter?
No, I think that we do basically the same things. We give clonidine if it's not in the setting of the ICU. So we give clonidine, we give sometimes benzodiazepine if needed. Of course, only when the patient is monitored and we see that everything is okay. It's important to see that the patient is hydrated and all the salts in the blood are okay. And hopefully doing that, we hope that the patient will stay out, will
stay out of trouble, and they always do with your help.
Perfect.
So our next question,
Right.
please. This is a hot topic, and I'm so happy that we have two expert pulmonologists joining us on the panel today. So this is their question, and it's a vitally important one, which is how best can patients with FD take care of their lungs? Bat, do you want to give us your thoughts?
Okay. So I think that there are three important things that we have to do regularly in order to take care of our lungs. The first thing is to treat promptly if there is some kind of chest infection. If there are signs of cough, fever, then we don't have to wait. We just treat with antibiotics, sometimes with systemic corticosteroids if needed, and we have to treat that promptly. The second thing is bronchodilators therapy. Some of you really benefit from this therapy, and we can check that by doing pulmonary function tests prior and after administration of some kind of bronchodilators that you know, like albuterol, and to see if you benefit from that. And if you do, you can even use that daily to expand the lung and have better volumes. But the most important thing to maintain healthy lung is daily chest physiotherapy. There are several ways to do that. Our recommendation is the muscle insufflator, exsufflator, or cough assist, which also we know that the cough in FD is not very efficient, and sometimes part of the lungs are a bit collapsed. And that is the best way to ventilate the lungs and to take out all the sputum that needs to go out and to maintain healthy lung. And we have a short video showing how to do that.
My name is Gil Sokol. I'm a senior physiotherapist in the pediatric pulmonary unit. There are four main goals in keeping healthy lungs in familial dysautonomy. First goal is to improve the respiratory muscle strength. The second goal is to improve the lung volumes. The third goal is to improve chest mobility. But above all, the most important goal is to produce an effective cough. Improving respiratory muscle strength is done by MIT, Muscle Inspiratory Training, which acts like gym for the chest. By breathing against resistance, we are strengthening the muscles of the respiratory system.
עכשיו ניקח את זה, נניח את זה על הפנים ותנשמי עמוק. יופי, עוד הפעם. כל הכבוד, את אלופת העולם. שתי ידיים, להניח את זה על הפנים ו5 פעמים עמוק. יופי.
Improving lung volumes is done by breathing exercise by using an incentive spirometer which called tree flow.
עוד הפעם. ועכשיו חזק, 2. נהדר, בואי נהפוך. תחזיקי. ועכשיו בשאיפה, תרימי כדור אחד. נהדר, 1. 2. 3. תנסי עוד הפעם חזק. יופי. פו חזק. ולהשתעל. עוד הפעם. את נהדרת.
Improving chest mobility includes active stretching and mobility exercise that can be done independently or with the guidance of a physiotherapist or a trainer. Cough is the most important defense mechanism of the lung. In order to be able to cough effectively, we use a machine which is called mechanical insufflator-exsufflator that can produce an effective cough.
עמוק.
Wow, thank you for that amazing video. But such a vital piece of the puzzle to help keep FD patients' lungs healthy. Alex, I know you're also an expert in pulmonology. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, thank you, Lucy. I completely agree with all that Bud said, and our strategy is pretty much the same. What I want to emphasize is that a lot of the lung problems that we see in patients with FD are bronchiectasis, meaning they're areas of the airways that are damaged from recurrent aspirations, from infections, pneumonias, etc. And very important part in the treatment is to keep those areas completely clear of infection and inflammation, and daily physiotherapy is one of those things. Inhalations with the bronchodilators, with the saline, again, very much help in clearing the excess phlegm that accumulates in the lungs. And importantly, is the follow-up that we do with both lung functions, as Bud showed in her video, pulmonary function testing, and with serial chest imaging, whether it's CT or X-rays once in every 2 to 3 years, just to assess the degree of progression and decide how aggressive we want to be with the lung clearance techniques. And sometimes we even have to use chronic antibiotics just to keep the lungs protected.
Thank you for that. I mean, it's really, for us, it's incredibly uplifting to see that we have respiratory experts on our team, because the approach to FD is always very multidisciplinary, right? So having you guys as part of the team is an amazing opportunity for us and for the patients. I'm going to pose a few questions that came in through our live chat right now. One of them was, is Precedex a replacement for clonidine? Dr. Kaufman, do you want to take that as a question?
Sure. We think is a better form of clonidine. It's essentially a way to use clonidine with being able to control, like Alberto explained before, the effect at a more minute-to-minute level. That is useful, but it also requires much more care. And the best thing is to avoid all pharmacologic treatment for crisis. All drugs are, they can be effective, but they should be used only as last resource. So the answer to the question is, does it replace clonidine? Yes, it does. It's a similar type of drug.
So another question that came in from our audience refers really to the issue of getting hold of carbidopa if you're not in the US. And I know, Dr. Kaufman, I'm going to throw this back at you, because I know you've been very instrumental in reaching out to and create and your contacts in places like in England, in Queen Square. And do you want to mention a little bit about how patients can have access to carbidopa if they're not directly within the US?
Well, perhaps the best thing to do is to let us talk with your doctors, because the drug is always available locally. This is a compound that has been around for 40 years. We are just using it differently. Before, it had never been used alone, it was used for something else. The way we do it has nothing to do with the way it was used for Parkinson's disease. So it has no connection with that, but the drug is available. And in Israel, I'm sure that Adrian can tell you exactly how to do that. So, and in any other country, I will be happy to talk with your doctors and try and make it available.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. So some great questions coming in about the pulmonary care of patients with FD. Alex, I'm going to pose this one to you. Does playing a musical instrument help?
It's actually a fun question. It always helps because it helps psychologically, I'm sure. But interestingly, Alberto mentioned the study about prevalence of sleep problems in FD patients, and as we know, a lot of those patients have problems with respiration and apneas during sleep. And there was a very small study, but I think we can learn a lot about it, in patients with sleep apnea that played didgeridoo. I hope I pronounce it correctly. That's the tube Aborigines in Australia play, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed that playing this instrument improved the tone of the upper airway, so the sleep apnea actually improved. So referring from that, my guess would be trumpet or anything that you can blow, just like the cuff assist, would probably train the upper airway muscles and be of benefit.
I think we should use shofar.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
It's shofar, Alex. We could use it, and then we could report it every day. So perhaps that should be one of the conclusions of this section. You need the
So we
shofar
have
every
time
morning.
for one final question, which again relates to plenty of questions coming in about pulmonary care, which is great to see you guys are on it and you're thinking about it and you're doing what you can. But what's your feeling about the chest vest?
Are you asking to Bat?
Yes.
I don't think, but
maybe she
Bat, do
froze.
you use the chest vest? In my screen, she's frozen.
She froze.
I think she froze.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. Well, I'm sure not. I'm presuming because I know Bat that she's going to say she likes it, and is going to tell you how useful it can be, but it's not everything.
Fantastic.
So are we? Here I have 0 time.
So
I think we have some.
That concludes our question and answer session for the clinical panel. I want to thank each of our clinicians for being available, for answering your questions, and for their all-round awesomeness in treating FD. And it's a pleasure to work with all of you. I'm going to move on to the part of FD Day, which is always my favorite part, which are the distinguished awards. Each year, we select usually 4 adults and 1 child with FD who we want to recognize as courageous heroes in their everyday life. And they're the type of people who don't let FD stand in the way of what they want to do, where they want to go, and what they can achieve. Of course, I can't talk about this year's FD Distinguished Awardees without mentioning last year's winner, who was Miss Jamie Goldblatt, who unfortunately we lost this year. But Jamie, I hope that the spirit of the friends that have gone on to tell their story is uplifting for you wherever you may be. This year, our distinguished awardees, they represent people from all different kinds of diverse communities. We have patients from the US, South America, and Israel. So as an end to our clinical session, please welcome the 2020 distinguished awardees. Thank you.
I'm a people person. Makes me feel happy, especially love the colors. I just love mixing colors. I just do my imagination, like around it. Like all of these pictures I drew, mostly in my imagination. I'm proud of how I worked so hard, like my giant portrait for our friend. I'm really proud of myself. He like saved my life. I almost choked to death. Eat small bites and breathe. If you choke, you keep breathing. Or
I work in computers. I work in a home care agency doing IT, and I also have my own company where I repair computers. So I never actually went through a course on computers. It really pretty much came to myself. I love all parts of computers, all computer parts I love. And I learn new things every day on it. About 600 bikers every year that bike 180 miles that end up they finish at Chai Lifeline Camp Simcha. I feel amazing. Just the freedom. It's still very hard. Over the last 5 months, I did stop drinking by mouth. I put everything through my G-tube. I was very skeptical at first, but then I spoke to a bunch of close friends, family friends, and all that. And they did tell me whatever. They told me stuff that I needed to hear, and I still have crises every now and then, but it's not due to drinking by mouth. I was exposed to COVID at a party in March. Then about a week later, I had some symptoms. I had like coughing and I had a little chills and I didn't have fever. However, on day 10, I did have a lot of breathing issues. My coughing was terrible and I couldn't breathe. So luckily, thank God, I have something called a oxygen concentrator in my house. It's a machine that you plug into the wall and it makes its own oxygen. So I told my mother to put me on it. I really thank God for allowing me to be able to beat COVID-19.
There are a lot of great things about him. Let's see. He gives great hugs. Yeah. And he's so funny.
My name is Benny. I have 17 years old. I'm from Brazil, São Paulo, Brazil, and I like history. I wrote about history. Young Jewish movements in the context of the actuality. It is 5 games for each player. I go to other schools to play. I still like liking puzzles.
I'm a speech therapist, and this was my dream from when I was a child. Even if it takes a long time, really don't give up. Do whatever you can.
Never give up. Face forward.
Do your own thing. Don't let people say you can't do it. If you put your mind to it, you can do it. And just have the right people in your circle of life.
Just keep fighting
and find ways to survive.
Believe that they can, and I want them to believe. I want them to know and to not to be scared and to do things. It's very important.
Hi, so good afternoon and good evening, everyone. My name is Adrian Gilbert, and I'm one of the new co-chairs of the Scientific Advisory Board. As Faye mentioned, after many years of valuable service, Mike actually has decided to step down as chairman, Mike Brownstein. And I want to thank Mike personally and on behalf of the whole Scientific Advisory Board for his outstanding and sustained contribution. I know that he will remain very active in pursuit of the therapies for FD. So just to explain, earlier this year, the Foundation appointed 2 new co-chairs with very different backgrounds to take these forward. And here we are. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Professor Francis Lefcourt, who many of you know is a professor of cell biology and neuroscience at Montana State University in Bozeman and has published extensively about FD. Francis has a remarkably successful record of groundbreaking research in neurological disorders, and we are very lucky to have her. And in contrast, I'm actually a chemist by training. I'm located here in sunny Israel, although the sun is just going down, and with more than 2 decades in new drug development at Teva. I actually now head the pharmaceutical development at Neuroderm, which is an Israeli-Japanese company, part of Mitsubishi Tanabe, and we're developing new therapies for Parkinson's disease. And my eldest daughter, Tamar, who's watching, so hi, Tamar, is 19 years old and has FD, and I was also head of the Israeli FD organization some years ago. So we're bringing a very different but very complementary background to our new roles with a real mix of academia and industry. But we do share a strong and drive and commitment to improve the lives of all of our patients and all of those with FD who are watching, and to find those new treatments and just as soon as we can. So going forward, as you can see from this slide, several of our key contributors are on the SAB we're going to continue, and in particular Horacio and Sue and Lucy and others. But I would also like to thank publicly all those who've contributed to date and are handing the baton over to some new faces. And as you can see, we've brought in some new people, and I would like to introduce them to you briefly. Firstly, there's Adam Sachs, who, great guy and a parent like me, and I'm sure many of the US families know him well. He's a leader at Paragon, which is part of Catalent Biologicals, which is actually one of the top gene therapy companies in the world. So he's a great asset. We've also brought on board two renowned discovery scientists. One's an academic, who Horacio mentioned, Professor Adrian Krainer from Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, and from industry, a friend, Dr. Ralph Laufer, who's ex-Merck and Teva, who's actually now at a company called Lysogene, working on gene therapy for rare diseases based in Paris. So these are two great additions who are going to really bring us a new dimension to some of our thoughts on how we can move forward. And our final recruit is Dr. Bat El Baraluma, who you've just met, from the FD Treatment Center in Tel HaShomer, and she also brings, obviously, her expertise in pediatric pulmonology. We have a big challenge, and I've tried to capture here 4 of the key areas I think where we're going to be focusing as we move forward. And one of the big challenges today, obviously, given the funding concerns, the way that we can actually connect with our patients in our centers, is basically how we can build new partnerships and new directions and get those new therapies out there to make a difference. So this is us, and this is what we're going to be doing moving forward. I'm incredibly excited to be involved and to be this, and indeed honored. And I'd like to now hand over to my colleague, Franz, to introduce today's scientific research presentations.
Hi, everyone, and happy FD Day. Thank you so much, Adrian, for that introduction. Like you, I share a lot of excitement about our new scientific advisory board. I'm also just so happy to be co-directing it with you. I want to add that the major reason why my lab works on FD is because I'm also part of the FD family. I have 2 first cousins in Canada who have FD. So I'm as eager as all of you for developing new treatment strategies. The good news is more and more people are engaged in clinical and basic FD research, and I think the horizon looks bright for new treatment strategies for FD. So I'd like to introduce the research session now. And first, there's an announcement, just to make sure we're on the same page. So if I could have the next slide, please. Okay, so there's been a name change. The gene that Sue Slagenhop cloned for all of us originally was called IKB-KAP, which is a mouthful. So there's been sort of a convention change, and now the gene is called ELP1. And the protein encoded by that gene, we used to refer to it as ICAP, and now we're calling it ELP1, but you'll still see that those names are used interchangeably. So as you all know, in FD, the problem is that this protein, ELP1, its levels are reduced, especially in neurons, and there's some nice looking neurons there to the right. And so the goal for all of us is to try to increase ELP1 in neurons. Okay, could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so we have 4 brief talks today that will summarize research projects on FD, and of course there are many other labs working on FD, so this is just a snapshot. But all 4 of these studies are preclinical, and all of us, as you'll see, are really aiming to translate our findings into the clinic. So our first speaker will be someone you all know, Dr. Lucy Norcliffe Kaufman, who's the co-director of the Dysautonomia Center at NYU, and she'll be telling us about her work on the natural history study, and she's also generated a clinical development plan. And I hope you realize that these studies are absolutely fundamental for all of the clinical research the rest of us are doing. We need that foundation for our studies. Next, we will have Dr. Susan Slagenhop with us, who's a professor of neurology at Massachusetts General Hospital and at Harvard Medical School. She's also the scientific director of the Massachusetts General Research Institute, and she'll be describing her work on using small molecules to increase ELP1 levels in FD. I'm a professor of neuroscience at Montana State University and will be speaking next after Sue. And I'll be summarizing 2 projects going on in our lab, one on trying to prevent the progressive loss of vision, so the optic neuropathy that often develops as patients age. And the second project is we're trying to understand the role of the gut bacteria, the gut microbiome, and metabolism in FD. And the last talk in our session will be from our valued Israeli colleagues, Dr. Miguel Weil, professor at Tel Aviv University, and Dr. Bat El Bar Olumav, who's at Sheba Medical Center at Tel HaShomer. And they'll be presenting their work on using vitamin D derivatives to improve the health of neurons in FD. So I wanted to also bring your attention to the fact that there is a booklet that the Dysautonomia Center put out that will summarize much of this research, and it's on the Foundation website, so you can access that there. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker in the session, Dr. Lucy Norcliffe-Kaufman from NYU.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Lucy Norcliffe-Kaufman, and I'm going to tell you about the natural history study we have for patients with familial dysautonomia. A natural history study is a study that follows a group of people over time that have a specific condition or disease, in this case FD, and it collects health information to answer pressing questions like how a disease develops and how best to treat it. A natural history study forms part of a clinical development plan, which is really a blueprint for how new therapies can be tested in the clinic to target things that really matter to patients. FD was first described around the 1950s. For the next 20 years, there was really a flurry of information describing the clinical features of the disease. The first FD database was created by Dr. Axelrod around 1969. And around 2014, we modernized the database so it meets our needs today, and we can use it to develop guidelines that shape clinical practice, but as well in looking at towards the future with our clinical development plan, which meets patients with FD where they're at today and helps us think in ways in which we can find and test effective new therapies. So you're probably wondering, how does a bunch of data locked up in a cloud help me as a person with FD? When you come into the clinic, you meet with our nurse practitioners who collect a lot of vital health information, but you also meet with our FD scientists that use surveys and questionnaires to track features over time. All of this information comes in through our clinical research team and is uploaded into our natural history database, where it's used not only to shape guidelines, but to help make clinical decisions on a day-to-day basis. But in addition to this, when you come into the clinic, you also have the opportunity to give a sample of blood alongside your clinical information. And this blood is shared with our team of basic scientists who are all working on FD. That includes Dr. Francis Lefcourt, who's using mice models to tackle the neurological underpinnings of FD, Dr. Sue Slagenhart, who's looking at the genetic underpinnings of FD, and Dr. Miguel Weil, who's taking cells in culture and looking at the effects of different vitamins. Now, all of that information comes together with the idea of potential new therapies and options that we can try for patients. But basic science doesn't happen in a vacuum, and all of the basic science information is collected and considered alongside the clinical data, so we can link it back to individual things that happen to particular patients, but also to make sure we're targeting relevant pathways. And together with our scientific advisory board, we've really created a mechanism where drugs, ideas, can be tested with the hope that we can bring them back into the clinic and help the lives of FD patients today. One of the things that we're very excited about with the natural history study is that we're now working with a team of global investigators who all have permission for their patient data to be included in the database. So the steps are really in place to make this a global effort for every patient to get involved. We currently have 93 patients enrolled in the natural history study, which means there are 222 patients with FD out there that are not yet part of the natural history. What we want to do is bring those patients into the study because our data set becomes much more powerful if we're all together. This is a map of the Pale of Settlement that shows the Jewish emigration patterns. And what you can see is the vast majority of people emigrated and went to the US. The vast majority of people in our database are from the US, but we are still missing 45% of the US FD population. In Central and South America, we're still missing 2/3 of people. In Canada, however, and this is a shout out to the Canadian FD Foundation, we are missing only 16% of patients. In the UK, we're missing 82% of patients. And in Israel, we're still missing data from 98% of FD patients. So I really hope that this is an opportunity for us to galvanize the advocacy community to get behind these projects, to make sure that we can include people in the study regardless of where they live. If we look at the age breakdown of the patients enrolled in the natural history study, we see a few interesting things. We have 38 pediatric patients that we follow within our clinic, but the vast majority of patients are actually in the adult age range, and we know that there are different needs at various stages of the disease. Now, how can we give as many people as possible the chance to try a potential new therapy? Well, that comes from a thorough understanding of the underpinnings of FD. We know from the work of Dr. Francis Lefcourt and Dr. Suze Langenhaupt that there is this stage in development where ICAP is critically important, but there's also a stage, particularly through the teenage years, in which the nerve cells start dying off. And then, on top of this, in the adult patients, we start to see the effect of wear and tear on the organs, with things like high blood pressure and problems with the eyes contributing to some of the features. So it may well be that we need different things to measure at different stages of the disease. In younger patients, we might be looking at the changes in the retina, whereas in older patients, we might be looking at what happens with their walking. So what can you do to help as a community? The first thing we really would like you to do is to register and get involved in our natural history study, which you can do either by visiting one of our registered sites or calling us on the phone where you can consent to be involved. Another thing we need you to start doing is to start sharing your voice. Very soon, we're going to be going to the Food and Drug Administration, where you as FD patients and family members have the opportunity to tell your story about what matters to you. So hopefully, I've convinced you that the Natural History Study is a very important study that supports clinical care, basic science, and the path forward towards new therapies. You can participate in person at Hadassah, NYU, or Tel HaShomer, or call us and participate virtually over the phone. But we want you to share your voice and to come with us to tell the FDA what bothers you and why you need new therapies earlier. You can stay in touch. We regularly post updates from our natural history study on our website, the www.dysautonomiacenter.com. And finally, I want to thank Dr. Maria Kotrina, who's been instrumental in taking this project where it is today and really giving us the possibility to have an international, highly collaborative effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy. That's such an important message. And, we really are a community and we need everyone to participate so we can all move forward together. Well, now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Susan Slogenhaupt from Mass General Hospital and Harvard Medical School.
Hi. I'm really, really pleased to be here today for our first virtual FD Day. And while I miss seeing all of you in person, I'm really excited that we are able to include our friends from around the world and all of our friends in Israel. So I think that it's a unique opportunity for all of us to get together. So as many of you know, my lab has been working on FD for nearly 30 years now. And this is just a picture of the lab team that works on FD. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that we've been doing in the Mass General Research Institute in the Center for Genomic Medicine. And so before we get started, I have to give you a little genetics lesson. And so I want to start by just explaining to you about your genes. So your genes are located along a strand of DNA. So here's the string of DNA. And these genes are broken into pieces called exons. And in order for the protein to be made correctly, these exons have to be assembled correctly. So the instructions for proteins contain these exons and they have to be put together correctly. So in this example, it has to go blue, green, red, light blue, yellow in order for the protein to be made correctly. So it's kind of like thinking about a train and train cars. So if you look down below, you have a series of train cars. And let's just pretend that in order for this train to actually be able to get to the target, the train cars have to be assembled, toys, then juice, then milk. You can't leave out the juice car, or you can't flip the juice car with the toys car. It has to be assembled in just this way in order for the train to actually be able to run on the tracks. And that's the same way with your genes. So we know that the DNA change that causes FD disrupts a gene called ELP1. And what we see here is that it is a T to C change. So it's a C here that should be a T that causes FD. And what happens when this C is present is that exon 20, so remember the train cars, this is supposed to be put together, exon 19 followed by 20 followed by 21. If this comes together properly, then we get ELP1 protein made. If exon 20 gets left out, when the C is present, sometimes it skips exon 20. If it gets left out, then we don't have any ELP1 protein made. So what happens in FD? In FD, again, we want the trains to be put together 19, 20, 21. But in FD, most of the time, exon 20 is left out. And so that's what I'm showing here. Most of the time, exon 20 is left out, and that results in ELP1 protein being very low. And in fact, we see low ELP1 protein in almost all tissues, but in particularly neurons. And so cells in the brain and the peripheral nervous system do not have enough ELP1 protein. So how can we treat FD? We need to find a way to increase exon 20 inclusion, right? So it seems like a pretty simple problem. What we want to do is make these instructions for the gene to make ELP1 protein go together correctly. So we want to make exon 20 be put in the right place. And so there are many ways we could do this. And my lab has been working on developing a drug that when we put it on cells and give it to animals and eventually to people, it will cause exon 20 to be included. And if we can increase the level of exon 20, then we will end up increasing the amount of ELP1 protein, which is what we need to do in FD. There are other ways to do this as well, and that is using other pieces of DNA that could be turned into drugs. And you may have heard of ASO, antisense oligonucleotides, or modified something called a U1 snRNA. These are pieces of DNAs that are made into drugs that could also increase the level of exon 20. So our goal, of course, is to increase the amount of ELP1 protein in patients. So my lab has been working on developing a drug for FD. So back in 2005, we found that a kinetin, which is a small molecule, a drug, can increase the amount of exon 20 in the gene. And we found this by studying FD cells in a dish. And then we spent many years trying to create a mouse that has FD. So we do a lot of work with this mouse in my lab. We worked with Dr. Dragatsis and Dr. Dietrich at the University of Tennessee, and we created this mouse in 2015. And this is a very special mouse because not only does it have FD, it also has the human gene. So it has those train cars, exon 19, 20, 21, and it leaves out exon 20, just like FD patients do. So this is a very important mouse because we can treat the mouse and see if we can increase the inclusion of exon 20. So a couple years ago, we were able to show that if we give kinetin to our FD mice, it increases ELP1 protein and it increases the number of neurons, so brain cells and peripheral nerve cells, and it improves motor coordination and spinal curvature. So this is an exciting result. Now, many of you know that we've been working on this for quite a long time, and we learned that kinetin is not a great drug. It's too weak. It's not potent enough. It doesn't do a good enough job for people. So in 2012, we started a project funded by the NINDS Blueprint for Neuroscience Research Program, and to identify a better kinetin, something we called super kinetin, a drug that would be much better at increasing exon 20. And then in 2015, we formed a partnership with PTC Therapeutics, a company that's focused on finding drugs to modify this RNA splicing. So together with PTC, we have developed an excellent drug candidate, an excellent superkinetin that is currently in what we call late-stage toxicity testing. So although PTC is no longer bringing this drug to market or bringing this drug to clinical trials, they have agreed to continue to work with us and to provide this drug to us so that we could continue developing the drug. And so late-stage toxicity testing means we're testing to make sure that it's safe enough for patients. So if the drug proves to be safe, then my team, along with help from PTC and in collaboration with the FD Foundation and the FD Center, will all work together to hopefully bring the drug to clinical trials within 1 to 2 years. So what else are we doing at Mass General? And again, this is the team that's hard at work. They're all here today watching FD Day, and I'm really glad that they're here to see you virtually. But we have a lot of other work going on in the lab. And the point I wanted to make today is that it's all collaborative, meaning we're working with all of the other scientists that you're going to hear from today to try to make these projects, to bring these projects forward. So we're characterizing the eyes of those FD mice I showed you to understand the blindness. We're working with Dr. Lefcourt's lab on gene therapy, on developing gene therapy to hopefully treat blindness. And we're also working with a lab in Italy of Dr. Pagani to understand other new ways to maybe treat the eye using different ways to increase the level of exon 20. We're still working on developing the drug I told you about, the superkinetin, and we're currently testing that in our FD mice. And I just want to leave you with that message that we're always working with all of our colleagues for ways to find treatments for FD. And we need you. As you heard from Dr. Lucy Kaufman, we need to all work together. And most importantly, you are our partners in this work. We need you to be ready to participate in trials and to participate in the natural history study. Because when any of these drugs is ready to go, we need you to be ready to go as well. So thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you so much, Sue, for that excellent talk and for the brilliant work that you and your fantastic team do. We're really grateful. So now I'm going to introduce my own lab's presentation. Where our lab is at Montana State University. My team is also tuned in, and we've been studying FD for over 10 years. And so if I can have the presentation, please. Hi, everyone. This is Frances Lefcourt, and I'm going to be talking about some of the therapeutic strategies that we're using in our lab now to try to improve the health of people with FD. One of the projects I'm going to be talking about involves the GI tract, gastrointestinal function. So I thought it'd be nice to show you a photo, an image taken by Marta Javert in my lab of what neurons in your gut actually look like. And that's shown here. Okay, so the first of the two projects I'm going to talk about is a project we're doing that is called gene therapy. And basically what gene therapy is, it's the use of a virus to introduce a healthy copy of the gene that you want to replace. So in our case, we know we have a faulty copy of the ELP1 gene. And so we want a virus that will introduce a healthy copy of ELP1. Now, we want to target the retina because we know loss of vision is a major problem for people with FD as they age. And a picture of the eye is shown here. And in the back of the eye is the retina. And that's illustrated here. So the retina is composed of a set of different types of neurons. And from very nice work done in the Dysautonomia Center, we know that it's these large retinal ganglion cells that are the neurons that die in FD. And those are the neurons we want to rescue using gene therapy. So what we're going to do is we are using our mouse models for FD in which we have the same kind of progressive loss of retinal ganglion cells in the mice that occur in people with FD. And so we've made a virus that encodes a healthy copy of ELP1, and we've already injected it into the eyes of our mice. And we know that this healthy version of ELP1 gets expressed in the retinal ganglion cells. And in fact, we're going to be injecting this virus, encoding this healthy ELP1 into our mice that have FD starting next week. So I also want to tell you that gene therapy has been approved for other genetic diseases by the FDA, and in fact has been shown to work really, really well for another retinal genetic disorder. Okay, the second project we're working on is to try to improve GI tract function and metabolism in FD. So I know you're all familiar with some of the GI problems that occur in FD, but there are also metabolic differences in FD. So for example, many people with FD are very thin, and in fact, their BMI or body metabolic index has been shown by work in the Dysautonomia Center to be significantly reduced. And so the question is, why? And so it turns out metabolism, shown here, is very connected to what's happening in your nervous system and very connected to what's happening in your liver and to what's happening in your gut. And your gut is full of bacteria, trillions of bacteria. And these bacteria secrete chemicals that affect the nervous system. And so together, there's an axis called the gut-brain axis, which also involves the liver, and this regulates your body metabolism. And so we suspect that something is awry here. And so using, again, our mouse models, we're investigating this. And we're also investigating this using the stool samples and the serum samples that you have all so kindly been sending us. And this project is a collaboration. We're collaborating with Seth Walk and Valerie Copier, who are both colleagues of mine in Montana. Seth is a terrific gut microbiome ecologist, and Valerie Copier is a terrific biochemist with expertise studying metabolism. And of course, we're working with the Dysautonomia Center on this project and with all of you. And I'll show you some of the preliminary data on the next slide. Okay, so here's our analysis so far of the gut microbiome from the stool samples that you've sent us. So we've analyzed the diversity and the numbers of bacteria in the stool from people with FD and from their relatives. And there are two major findings. One, there are fewer types of bacteria. So that's referred to as diversity or alpha diversity in the microbiomes of the people with FD versus their healthy relatives. And there are also significant differences in the types of bacteria and numbers of bacteria in the relatives versus the people with FD. So something is very different about the gut microbiome in FD. We find the same thing in our mouse models that have FD. And interestingly, you know, many of the patients are often taking antibiotics, so you might not be so surprised to find differences in the gut microbiome. But in fact, our mice don't take any antibiotics, and we're still finding the same kinds of differences in diversity. So this is something we're going to continue to work on. We'll be working closely with the Dysautonomia Center on this and try to figure out how this could be clinically useful to those of you with FD. Now, similarly, we find significant differences in the metabolism of people with FD versus their relatives. And we see these metabolic differences both in the stool samples you've sent us and in the serum samples. And you can see many metabolites are lower in FD and some are higher in both the stool and the serum. And I'll give you a synopsis of these findings so far on the next slide. So some of the major take-home findings we find is that in general, most metabolites are decreased in patient samples compared to relatives, except for choline and taurine, which are both elevated in the stool of FD patients, and urea, which is also elevated in the serum of FD patients. So why are these changes clinically significant? Well, choline is really important. It's converted to an important signaling molecule for neurons called acetylcholine. It's also converted into phosphatidylcholine, which is a key component of cell membranes. Taurine is important because it's used to make bile salts, which are critical for breaking down compounds in the gut and nutrient absorption. So the fact that it's elevated in stool and decreased in serum could suggest that there's faulty reabsorption of nutrients. Urea is a product of protein being broken down. And so the fact that it's elevated would suggest that there's too much protein being broken down in people with FD. And that would be expected if pathways for making energy for cells in FD were not working at the highest efficiency. In support of this finding, we also see decreased levels of amino acids in serum, which are the components of protein. And it's also supported by the fact that many patients have muscle breakdown. And again, that would happen if you're trying to make more energy. So in summary, what these data suggest is that proteins are being broken down in FD to obtain energy, and cells are essentially starving for metabolites, and that's why this excessive breakdown is occurring. And our data also suggests that there's some dysfunction in the absorption of nutrients in the gut. And so again, we will be discussing these data with the Dysautonomia Center. We're going to continue to work on this and try to see what we can do with these in terms of translating this to some kind of therapeutic. So that's it. I want to thank everyone, especially those of you in families with FD, because your samples have been critical for this work. I want to thank the Dysautonomia Foundation, the NIH, which has funded all of our work. I want to thank the fantastic people in Montana who have done all this work. Mike Brownstein, David Brenner, who first brought me into the FD Center, and my terrific collaborators in the Dysautonomia Center and working with me on the Retina Project. So thank you very much. Okay, I guess I can't comment on my own talk. So we'll move on to the next talk, where I'm really thrilled to introduce Dr. Miguel Weil from Tel Aviv University and Dr. Bat El Bar Aluma from Tel HaShomer.
Hi, my name is Miguel Weil. I've been part of the FD family since my eldest son nears birth 29 years ago. For the past 16 years, I've been in my laboratory at Tel Aviv University. We have been involved in understanding the role of ELP1 ICAP in neuronal development in animals and cellular FD models. Starting 10 years ago, we have been developing drug screening systems using patient cells by screening thousands of new or old drugs to find potential treatments for rare diseases. And as part of this effort, I am presenting you today, together with Dr. Batel Bar Aluma from Shiva Medical Center, a new clinical perspective for an old known factor in familial dysautonomia. And this old factor is called nerve growth factor, or NGF, which is a survival factor of the peripheral nervous system. This factor was discovered in the 60s by Rita Levi-Montalcini and Stanley Cohen, which awarded them in 1986, the Nobel Prize. And the fundament of this factor is that is originated and produced by peripheral organs, which are nourished, innervated by this peripheral system, by these peripheral neurons that are completely dependent on this factor for their survival and function. Without NGF, these neurons will die. So what about NGF as an old suspect in FD pathology? So since the 80s, early 80s, has been shown that NGF deficiency drives to poor peripheral neuron development, function, and survival, as it is in familial dysautonomia. And also they found at that time that FD show NGF reduced activity generally, and surprisingly, they found that NGF levels are low in serum, blood serum from FD patients. This, at that time, gave us the hint that probably NGF-related problems are related with the genetic origin of the FD disease, which turned out not to be the case. But the problem today still, this paradox still remains. So, and the time we tried from the last, recently, we tried to find in our research to find out that there is a problem in NGF regulation of NGF synthesis and in FD patient cells, and to find out the connection to the serum pattern found in FD patients, we established a test to measure NGF in serum samples. So this brought us to the question whether is NGF a useful FD biomarker in serum, that which eventually will allow us to state the understanding whether NGF could be a useful factor for clinical assessment, to understanding whether connecting to data, patient data, and understanding whether this could be a marker to follow any future treatments. So to this end, what happens in FD, you could see in the left-hand side that the NGF levels are low in blood, and we think that potentially to test this question, we would like to find a drug that could have an effect increasing NGF, and concomitantly would be able to detect this increase in blood serum. So we managed to find in the literature such a compound, such a drug, which is a derivative of vitamin D. We tested this vitamin D on FD patient fibroblast cells, and it turned out that it works, that potentially this vitamin can increase NGF levels in FD cells, and that brought us to to testing vitamin, and the clinical idea that to test vitamin D3 and derivative called calcitriol potential to modulate NGF in serum of FD patients. But the floor is yours.
Okay. So many of you know what is vitamin D because you take it, some of you take it regularly for to increase calcium against osteoporosis. So we have, we're going to talk about 3 forms of vitamin D. First, the one that you're taking, some of you are taking, but to be active, it has to go through 2 stops in our body. The first one is in the liver, where it goes hydroxylation in a 25 spot, and then it is called 25-hydroxy vitamin D3. It is not yet the active form, just the semi-active. And then it goes to the kidney, where it goes through another hydroxylation, and this is the active form, which is called calcitriol, or 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D3. So we know that we have a very good way to measure NGF levels in the blood, very reliable way. and we want to test if vitamin D can increase the levels of NGF. So we're gonna measure at baseline levels of NGF, levels of the active form of vitamin D, and also other forms related to calcium metabolism. Then we're gonna give one of the two, or the semi-active or the active form, for a period of 6 weeks. At the end of these 6 weeks, we're gonna measure again levels of NGF and levels of 124 25 hydroxy vitamin D, and to see if indeed the increase in vitamin D caused the increase in the levels of NGF, then a period of washout, and then again with the other compound. Hopefully we will get good results, and we'll see that there is a correlation between levels of vitamin D, active vitamin D, and NGF, and if the results will be encouraging, then we will move forward to an open trial, to see if there is also what are the clinical effects of increasing NGF in the blood. Thank you.
And to finish, I want to acknowledge the people involved in this research in my lab from the present and past, and as well to obviously to my sharing collaborators at the Sheba Medical Center, and as well our collaborators at the Dysautonomia Center in NYU School of Medicine, Horacio, Lucy, and Maria. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Miguel and Bat-El, for a very, very interesting talk. And you have a really powerful platform for discovering new compounds to help in FD. So that's fantastic. I want to thank all the speakers for sharing their very exciting research findings with all of us. I have a brief summary slide just to summarize what we've been discussing, and then I'm going to turn this over to Adrian Gilbert, who will moderate a question and answer session on current research. So you can see in this slide that we all share the goal, as Sue described initially, of increasing levels of ELP1 in cells. For any of this work to occur, sorry, my phone's ringing, we need a natural history study and a clinical development plan, and that's what Lucy and the Dysautonomia Center are working on. The study that Miguel and Bat-El discussed about increasing vitamin D levels to increase downstream signaling molecules like NGF is a very powerful strategy. The work Sue described with her great team, including Elisabetta and Monica, designing small molecules that increase splicing so we can increase levels of ELP1 protein, is going to be extremely powerful. The work we're trying to do with gene therapy, we're hoping will be very effective. It's a collaboration with Sue's group and with Claudio Punzo, who's a retina gene therapy expert at UMass. And lastly, we're hoping to sort of look at the whole big picture too, by looking at metabolism and the gut microbiome, and see if things can be tweaked there to overall improve health. So I just want to thank everybody. It's a collaboration. We all need to work together. And I apologize to all the researchers who weren't included in this, but believe me, there's a lot of great work going on in research in FD. Adrian.
Great, thank you, Francis. This is fascinating and I'm really enjoying it. I think now what we'd like to do is to put some questions to our distinguished panel, who I hope will be able to answer at least some of them. And together with some prepared questions we have, we'd also be very happy to have new questions if you could post them either in the YouTube live chat or to the FD website. We'll be very happy to try and include them. And I have about half an hour or so to be able to deal with your questions, so please don't be shy. So let's start. I think I'm going to start first with Lucy. I'm going to be with some questions which have already been posted. Lucy, how's the natural history study going? And is it useful to you? So this is your chance to tell us what we need to do.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I think that the natural history study is going well in terms of what we've been able to set up, what we've been able to put together, and what we've been able to build. We just need a mechanism to make sure we're capturing more people. I mean, the data becomes more powerful and more useful the more people we have included. I mean, it's this incredible resource for us that has shaped clinical practice and also research. I mean, we have been following, for example, things like the retina, like Frances mentioned in her talk. We discovered a number of years ago that the reason people with FD were losing their sight was because the nerves at the back of the eye were dying. So what we actually are able to do with the natural history study is track those nerves by measuring them over time. So really that gives us a target to be able to see if drug therapies that we're trying are working. And if they're not, that means we need to go back to the drawing board and we need to think again in other strategies. But the natural history study is really the backbone, I hope you see, to many of these basic science projects. It's like I mentioned to you, like basic science can't happen. It can happen in a vacuum, but it's less effective if it happens in a vacuum without the consideration of the clinical data alongside that. And it's when you really bring clinical science and basic science together that you get this translational element that helps you actually progress and develop new therapies. So
excellent. So it's going to help. It's going to help us for all of the approaches. Yes.
Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt you. So that's great. So it's really, on one hand, we're going to learn everything that we can about what's going on, but basically the future, when we design the clinical development of whatever is going to come out, some of these ideas that we've come out, this is going to serve us to move forward. So it's really, really important. It's just going to take much longer if we don't have a good natural history database. So now, Francis, we have a question for you. So how close are we to treatment for retinal neuropathy? You've whetted our appetites, and someone's even asking, how about a gene therapy cure for FD? So how long have we got to wait?
So again, there's several ways to approach the problem of trying to rescue the retinal ganglion cells. Sue's working on her splicing compounds could very well do the trick, and that's part of the project her group and Elisabetta Marini and me and Claudio Punzo are working on together to see if those compounds will work, in addition to replacing the gene and doing a classic gene therapy. So for the mice, we were held back a few months because of COVID. We'll be doing the injections next week. We'll know in a few months if it's working in the mice. If it's working in the mice to protect the retina, then we will start having serious discussions as a community with the foundation, with the Dysautonomia Center, as to how to move forward and translate this to patients. That's one thing. In terms of beyond the retina, if it works in the retina, then what would be fantastic is to deliver the gene systemically. So, for example, there's another genetic neurological disorder called SMA, and gene therapy has been shown to work systemically there beautifully. And you just do one injection of the virus, and infants are able to, who were practically paralyzed, are able to hold themselves up and to move. So we would like to consider doing systemic gene therapy, but the sort of the proof, first test of principle will be our experiments in the retina.
Yeah. I mean, this is amazing. When we read about gene therapy in all of these other diseases, and we always get a bit jealous because we think, why can't someone do something in FD? And it looks like maybe we are going to do something in FD. I mean, we can't promise, but we're doing it really, really trying very hard. We've got the best people on it. And the idea of being able to save people's sight, people who are watching this, we're going to keep being able to watching this going forward. I can't think of a better thing to be doing. So thank you for that.
I'll mention one point just to also boost people's spirits. The NIH has been funding all of this work. It's been funding Sue, it's been funding our lab, So, we might feel like we're an isolated community, but if we make good, convincing arguments to the NIH, they support us.
Yep. And we haven't really said it, but the people we've collected here, and yourself included, are really quite good at working with NIH to get the funding. And that's as important as the science, because if they don't fund it, we can't do the science. So this is a really, really important aspect as well, and I'm glad you mentioned it. If anyone, by the way, has questions about anything that we're saying, please, again, this is my plug, write them in the live chat or send them in by one of the other media, but we'd be very happy to try and answer your questions. I have one or two, but for now I'm going to keep going. So the next question is actually about new therapies coming down the pipeline, maybe some of the things which haven't been mentioned up to now. And I guess we should divide these between symptomatic and really disease modifying, like gene therapy. So maybe if I could ask you, Alberto, we could talk a little bit about the symptomatic treatments. In particularly, maybe people are interested to know about blood pressure and how we can stabilize blood pressure in FD. Maybe you can give us some thoughts about that.
Sure, absolutely. I'll be glad to. So one approach we've been using for a number of years now at the center has been the carbidopa, right? Which is familiar to many of you, and Dr. Kaufman mentioned briefly in his initial presentation about clinical updates. Well, many of you participated in a clinical trial for which we used, in which we used carbidopa to improve blood pressure variability in patients with FD. Well, that trial finished a few months ago. We put together all the results, and we are excited to announce that the carbidopa works very well. I mean, it's now absolutely proven, right? And we did a very rigorous trial using even placebo, right? Many of you don't like placebo, but we trial led by Lucy. And as I'm telling you, it does work beautifully compared to placebo. And the results will be published very soon in a great journal called Hypertension. So this is going to be publicly available to everyone. And it's a great example of how placebo-controlled studies, placebo-controlled trials in FD are feasible, and how we can define whether a drug works or not with these mechanisms, right? So I want to specifically congratulate Lucy about this, but also congratulate all our FD patients who participated in that trial, because now we have solid results showing that carbidopa works for them.
That's very important. I think one of the things I know for myself, and I may be speaking more as a parent here, we're always a little bit nervous to start new treatments because we're going to discover things that these treatments are going to do with our patients or our kids which we weren't expecting. And I think it's really important to hear about, in a controlled way, the safety of these new treatments in FD. So carbidopa, it's safe?
It is very, very safe. You know, it's we didn't find any severe side effect. Some people experience some mild, very mild, short-lasting discomfort, particularly gastrointestinal discomfort, but overall it's one of the safest medications that we work with, right? So nothing to do with other medications. It doesn't have any impact on respiration, and overall it's extremely safe.
Excellent. So it's very well tolerated. That's good news. Okay, and it's been proven, and I look forward to reading that. Okay, so now when we're talking about other therapies, we're going to talk a little bit more about those disease-modifying therapies. And Sue, I just add on a question which came in. So actually, how does increasing ELP1, how does that help neurons? And what can we expect from increasing ELP1 to help FD patients? This is an excellent question, because the disease isn't ELP1, it's FD. So
Exactly.
how can you answer that?
I actually saw that question come in, and I'm going to punt the what does increasing ELP1 do to neurons to Frances, because she could tell you that much better than I could in terms of like studying neurons and looking at that. So Frances, do you want to take the first part of that, and maybe I'll take the second?
Sure. Okay. So ELP1 is really an important protein in the cell. So, you know, your cell, you have all these little departments within the cell, and all those departments have to communicate well with each other in order for that cell to be healthy. You know, it's like You need your liver to work and your kidney to work and your heart to work. So the cell has all these essentially internal organs as well. So what ELP1 does is it is involved in the production of other proteins. So imagine like a waterfall. If there's some interruption of the waterfall at the very top, it's going to have a huge downstream consequence. And that's what's happening with ELP1. If there isn't enough ELP1 at the top of the waterfall, then many other proteins aren't going to be produced normally. And if you're missing all these proteins, then many aspects of the cell biology aren't going to function normally. Also, what can happen if you don't have ELP1, you get big clumps forming inside cells, aggregates, and that can also gum up the cell so it physically can't function normally. Right? Sue?
Thanks, Francis. Thank you for that great explanation. And I will just add to that about what we know about what happens in our mice when we increase ALP1. So as I mentioned, when we've increased ALP1 by feeding mice kinetin and by also using other compounds, and when we show that there is increased ALP1, the mice walk better. So they have improved gait, they have improved balance. We do things, we test mice on various, we make them walk on a gait analyzer, we make them walk on put them on a rotorod, a little rod that spins, and see how well they can stay on the rod. And we can actually count the number of neurons in different areas of their peripheral nervous system. And all of these things are improved when we can increase ALP1. So of course, we don't know yet what this will look like in FD patients. But as soon as we get a drug or another method like gene therapy or something that's ready for patients, then we'll be able to find out.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. So I suppose when we get to the clinic, that's exactly one of the things we want to validate, is to track the increase in ELP1 in the patient and to track these changes in their disease or in how they function going forward. So this is really what the stage that we'd like to get to when we get to the right treatment to go into the clinic, given that it's safe. Okay, thank you, ladies. That was a great answer. Go ahead.
I would just like to add that we can now track the levels of ALP1 in FD patients in their blood. And this test was developed with help from PTC. And so now we'll have that test available to us so that when any of these treatments come on board, one of the things we will be able to test is the levels of ALP1 in patients' blood.
Okay, excellent. So ELP1 is something to be followed up. I'm trying to scribble down all the time new questions which are coming in. So now I'm going to put a question actually to Miguel out here in Israel with me. Miguel, we actually heard from Francis that she's taken patient samples and she's done some great things with Biosome and looking at retina as well. My question to you is, you want samples too. So if we get the samples in Israel from patients and through the treatment center, what's the research that you're going to do? And I understand, maybe tell us what you want to do with those samples.
So, okay, so first of all, I need to tell you that some of the samples we use for the testing of this NGF in serum were given by the FD Center in New York, and that helped us to understand the levels in blood. Now, why do I need cells? We need basically very small amounts of skin biopsies, about 2 millimeters in size, from which we will take a high number of cells, where we are going to use in our pipeline to test future drugs, as well as to understand in a personalized level for each patient what is the phenotype, how the FD comes out in cells like skin fibroblasts as well as in neurons. Once we have that, we would like to test the effects of the coming drugs in the pipeline, whether ours or those coming from Sue, and test on a personalized basis the effects on that cells, and hopefully we could go back with the information to you and into the natural history of each of these patients, and probably predict the way these drugs could be given specifically for those patients that we treat, where we were work on the cells previously.
Okay.
But this is kind of big picture.
Okay, so that's a great answer. So really what we're talking about is, although we can actually see in front of us personalized medicine, but we can see in the front of you, I take myself out, there's the 5 of you and other people, but we're really building a network of how to exchange the information and build our understanding of which are the molecules that we want, the drugs that we want to try going forward. We'll test in animals, but we're going to share the information and hopefully get into the clinic soon for all of the patients. So that's a really clear message that's coming out. I'm going to move on to another question now, and I'm going to throw it actually at Sue. And it's a very basic question, but I think needs a quite complicated one to answer. Why do different people with FD have different clinical profiles?
It's a very interesting question and an important question. And I want people to understand that this is typical of genetic diseases. So most people with genetic diseases, the phenotype is not exactly the same from patient to patient. And so in FD, if we think about it, while everyone has the same mutation, that same change that you've heard many of us talk about, the rest of people's genomes is not identical, right? They have many other different genes that are different from each other. And so many of these genes likely modify the phenotype of FD. And what that means is some of these genes may have certain what we would call certain alleles of genes that maybe make FD more severe, maybe make FD milder. I'm sure that some of the phenotype of FD between patients also differs by the extent and quality of medical care that we received earlier. But we're focused on understanding what these genetic differences are. So one of the goals of future work would really be to be able to understand what other genes modify the phenotype of FD. So what are the other genes in the genome that make some patients have a very severe phenotype and others be relatively mild, even though their FD mutation is identical? And we don't know the answer to that.
That's a really good question. So what are the other genes? And actually someone has just written in and asked us, do you think that the level of ELP1 in a patient, is that indicative of the severity of their disease?
So our hunch, I think that everybody here would agree with me that that is our hunch. We believe that that's likely true. We think that it makes sense to us that if you don't have as much ELP1 as others, you can see from the diagrams that we showed that when there's different levels of that exon 20 inclusion and different cells include different amounts of it. And so therefore it makes sense to us that some patients who are milder might be able to include exon 20 a little more often than others. Maybe there are some of these genetic modifiers that I talked about. Maybe there are other genes that are involved in splicing that are having an effect. We don't know at this point, but that makes sense to us. We have tried to look, and this is part of the goal too of what Lucy talked about in terms of the natural history and really understanding phenotypes in FD patients, because we would like to see if we can figure out a way to correlate the level of ELP1, now that we can measure it in patients, with specific phenotypes to see if there's a correlation between the levels and specific phenotypes. And we're working on that now with the FD Center.
So when we see a treatment increase the level of ELP1 in a patient, we want to know, is that going to help their disease, or is that just something that we can see as a measurement which isn't related? That's really important. We think it, but we need to understand it and we need to show it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, great. That's an excellent question. I've actually been asked a question which I don't know I'm a good person to answer, but someone's taking a lot of carbidopa, up to I think more than 20 capsules a day, and it's working great. And how do we work with the pharmaceutical companies or the compounding or pharmacies to be able to see how maybe we can get higher doses made and to help our patients? And I think, I mean, I don't know, this is necessarily a research, more a pharmaceutical question, but it's probably something maybe the compounding pharmacists in the hospitals could perhaps help with. Do you want to mention, Alberto, maybe do you want to comment to that?
Sure. I think the problem lies on the fact that the commercially available capsules for carbidopa are 25 milligrams, right? So that's what most pharmacies have, 25 milligram capsules. the dosages we are using in FD patients to treat the blood pressure problems, the dosages of carbidopa are much more high, much higher than that, right? We are using in the range of 100, 200, or even 300 milligrams. So that results in the fact that many patients are taking a lot of capsules. So Adrian, as you mentioned, the best step or the best course of action is probably to get in touch with a compounding pharmacy who is able to customize the dose of that patient, and instead of that patient taking 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 capsules, maybe they just have to take 1 or 2. And from the FD Center, we are glad to help because we have this experience with other patients who are having this predicament, and we can help, particularly if they are local. In the New York area, we have a number of compounding pharmacies that work with us.
But also there are compounding pharmacies in the other hospitals, even when they don't come to NYU or Tel HaShomer, and you can maybe help and be in contact with some of those centers as well, and to reach out. Yeah. We've actually had a question which relates a little bit to the gut research from Francis. The people are asking, should we be taking nutritional supplements that include taurine or choline? Is this something that you think would be helpful, or should we wait to see if there's more research?
First of all, I would wait because we're still analyzing all the data. We're still analyzing all the data, so I would wait. But certainly the goal is that we be able to design some kind of supplement, recommendation for some kind of supplement that could be beneficial based on this type of analysis. I guess I should also mention that, part of the reason why there is this protein breakdown, we think, is because energy production in the cell isn't optimal in FD, so that there's a part of the cell that makes energy, the mitochondria, and what we know now is the mitochondria don't work very well. So we're actually doing some experiments with supplements that bypass the part in the mitochondria that doesn't work. And that's looking promising in mice. But again, it's early days, but definitely that's the end goal, is once we've completed all these analyses to have some recommendations.
And I guess it will be the same, Miguel, when we're thinking about calcitriol or even vitamin D3, that we're sharing the research, but it's a little early to go and to tell people to go off. And I mean, we're taking vitamin D, but whether specifically what you mentioned, calcitriol, and at what dose, it's a little early, but this is something that we'll try to come up with as quickly as possible with a recommendation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, sure. I think the most important point that I want to make is that we know that a lot of people, a lot of children and FD patients are taking already vitamin D supplements, but the idea here is to clarify and specify how certain amounts of vitamin D derivatives could increase these levels of NGF, and probably because it has been shown that this has a problem is related with FD, probably bringing it up, it will have an impact in the nervous system and hopefully will increase survival of those neurons that are compromised by the lack or the low levels of this factor. And in this compensatory way, we might probably have a beneficial effect of anyone that can be taking these safe vitamins in a very well, distinguished manner, right? In a very directed manner.
So someone's asking us, are ELF1 and NGF related?
This is an excellent question.
Okay.
Can I answer?
We can agree. Sure.
So no, they are not related per se, but they are connected in a way, like Francis mentioned, that there is kind of this waterfall coming down, related with the ELP1 mutation. I mean, the FD mutation has an impact on many different systems, including the production of NGF. We still don't know what is the relationship, but we know that if we could build this up, probably some things that are related with NGF can become better.
Excellent. Well, I think we've actually answered all the questions which were put to us, both during the week and today. So thank you, everyone. So some of them you were prepared for, and some of them you were not prepared for, and I think you've done extremely well in managing them. I want to I think it's been exciting, uplifting, insightful. No one should get carried away that tomorrow we have that treatment, but we're working very, very hard with some very good people to bring that forward. And I think it's just really great to see such a diverse and global panel together, acting and working together. So thank you everyone for your presentations, for your answers, and for your time, and for everything that you do for FD. And now I'm going to hand it back basically to Lainey to wrap up today's event.
Thank you, Adrian. And thank you to our wonderful, brilliant, and informative international panel of speakers. We learned so much about what's happening in our FD community today. And it's so exciting to learn that we are entering a new era of collaboration between and among the FD communities worldwide. All of this means improved access to the most up-to-date treatments and knowledge for all. We are indeed one community with shared objectives, and we can achieve so much more by working together. The Foundation will continue to serve as a uniting force through ongoing communication, the best that we can. Today we heard about many opportunities for patients and families to contribute to and participate in work underway, including research studies, natural history studies, and the patient-focused drug development meeting at the FDA. We encourage you to get involved in any way that you can. Our shortened program format may have limited our time to answer every question that was submitted, or maybe you'll think of new questions. We are always available to answer questions and to respond to things that come up, and we will find other forums to continue the conversation, so please do stay tuned. Also, today's program will be archived on the Foundation's website after some post-production in case you missed a session, or if you want to go back and watch again or send friends or relatives to watch any of the sessions. So stay tuned and check back to the website so that you can watch the program again. The Foundation looks forward to continuing to be an important resource for families affected by FD. Please keep in touch with us and let us know how we can best help and support you. And we need your help too. Please go to the URL that you'll see on the screen shortly and visit the Foundation website at famdis.org to make a gift or to contact us to find out about more ways to get involved. And we encourage our international community to support your local FD chapter as well. We also want your feedback on today's event. For many of you, it may have been your first FD day. We will be sending an evaluation to everyone who registered, and we hope that you will take the time to fill it out and send it back to us. We hope to see you again for FD Day 2021. And now I am pleased to bring back Dr. Horatio Kaufman for some closing remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It has been a long program. I hope you enjoyed and took advantage of it. There was a lot of information. I want to reassure you, as I said at the beginning, that we do have a great orchestra, and that the orchestra is playing for you. Now, we don't live in a vacuum, and these are very difficult times in America and in the world, but particularly in America. So we all thought it was a good time or a good way to end this conference when we were all together, emphasizing something that 200 years ago, some lyrics from 200 years ago, and my grandfather used to sing them, and the lyrics were in Yiddish. So I wanted you to hear them as a way to finish this program. So can we have that? And thank you very much. Thank you, merci, toda rabba, gracias, and we'll see you very soon. We will get there. Thank you.